Right there.
White belly up.
This is the game. It's cat and mouse.
Smoked a turkey. Yes. He is down. He is freaking down.
Said he shot an absolute giant.
Follow-up session, baby.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Follow-Up Session podcast episode. I'm your host this week, Sam Thrash with Follow-Up Session, and joining me on the phone today, I have my good buddy, our media production manager, Mr. Nick Powell. What's happening, Nick?
Hey, not a whole lot, Sam. Glad to be back.
You sound excited.
I am excited.
We obviously, guys, we would much rather be doing this in person. I really wish we could, but
yeah, for sure.
We have busy lives and busy schedules, and over the phone, just recently this summer has worked out a little bit better for us to make something happen for you guys and keep podcasts coming every week. So it is what it is, man. We're going to roll with it. So
yeah, we're gonna make the best of it. Thankful for technology.
Yes, absolutely. So, when we're going to throw a jab initially, because joining us on the line right now was supposed to be our marketing manager, Drew Tvrdik. We are about to do a two-part episode series, basically, this week and next week over Montana and hunting in Montana. And Drew was supposed to be joining us for that, but Drew doesn't like to answer his phone. So
yeah, what the heck, Drew?
Yeah, Drew, what the heck, man?
Where you at, bro?
So hopefully Drew's going to be able to randomly join us later on this episode, and if not this episode, for part 2 of this episode series. But if not, you guys are more than welcome to join us in giving him a hard time, because we very much wanted his expertise for these 2 episodes. So
yeah.
So like I said, guys, this week we are going to be talking about Montana. Episode 1 today, we're going to be kind of recapping my 2018 Montana Pronghorn hunt. I'm super excited about this. This is an episode I've looked forward to sharing with you guys, a story I've looked forward to sharing with you guys for a long time. It is the video for it is on our website and our YouTube channels, but we have not really told this story on the podcast. We've actually refrained from telling this story on the podcast in the past, Nick, just because we wanted to save it for an episode, you know?
Right, yep.
So, part 1, this episode is going to be 2018 Montana, and then part 2 next week. Be sure that you guys tune in again when we're going to talk about kind of our 2019 recap from last year, and also our expectations moving forward for 2020. So, be sure that you guys tune in for that episode next week as well.
That's an episode I'm really looking forward to, because hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, we will both know whether we drew a pronghorn tag or not.
Oh no, there's no hopefully in that, buddy. So guys, we are recording this episode on August 5th, and the draw results for Montana 2020, the general tag that me, Nick, and Drew all put in for, is August 6th. So literally tomorrow we are going to find out if we were successful in drawing for Montana, which all of our fingers are crossed. We sure are hoping. It would have worked out a lot better if we could have recorded these podcasts after the draw. But again, work schedules and availability comes into play. We had to record today, so here we are.
And plus, that leaves a little bit of suspense for the audience, for our listeners.
Yeah, I'll have to record a little snippet, a little clip that we can stick into next week's episode. Just a little addition that'll let everybody know if we got drawn or not. So.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna let Nick take it away and let you guys know everything you need to know about our good friends over at Elite Archery. So.
Man, Sam, I couldn't be more happy with our partners over at Elite. And I know you feel the same way, because you're shooting the new Cure. I have my hands on a Ritual 33, and they have hooked us up tremendously and really put out some awesome products. So I couldn't be more happy with our partnership with them. They have really taken care of us. And if you guys haven't yet, go check out their website at elitearchery.com, and they have everything there that you could ever need. They have a custom bow setup where you can go in there and set up your bow exactly how you want it. It'll tell you how much it is, all the specs to it. And also, if you haven't yet, go to your local archery shop and take the Elite Shootability Challenge. And I promise you, you will not be let down.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, man. Spoken like a true podcast host.
I don't know about that.
Well,
I try my best.
I do know about that, actually. Our followers have spoken. So last week on Fall Obsession Podcast, guys, and this is kind of a sidetrack from our Montana episode here, but last week we put a poll on our Instagram following the episode. We told you in the episode we were going to do this. We're going to put a poll on our Instagram on whether Nick is a good or a terrible podcast show host. Because Nick thinks that he's terrible, apparently. So I have the results. If you would give me just a second, I will pull them up here for you. All right, here they are. So 71% of you guys said that Nick is, in fact, an excellent show host. 29% of you guys said that he's terrible. So, Nick, I don't know whether you should be happy that you can still host podcast episodes, or if you should be mad that 29% of our followers think that you suck.
You know what? I am going to think I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so I'm going to focus on that 71%. And also, like we're in school, 71% is passing. So,
well, unless you go to paramedic school.
Yeah. We won't talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
So anyway, there you guys go. There are the results from our poll from last week's episode. So,
well, yeah, and a big thanks to everyone who said yeah, who voted yes. And then for those of you who voted no, I'll try and do better.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit right there, buddy. All right, guys. So, time to dive into Montana. So this really was a unique opportunity for me, and I had really only hunted whitetails and hogs and turkeys down here in Texas leading up to then. So being invited to go up to Montana and on a pronghorn hunt like this was an opportunity I'd never had before. And a little backstory on that: our marketing manager Drew Tvrdik, who is not on this episode with us right now.
Currently waiting.
Yeah, waiting. We're buffering. He sent me an email asking, "Well, would you looky there? Looky there, who's calling?"
Is that who's calling?
That's who's calling. All right, here we go. Let's get Drew in here. Hey, Drew.
Hey, how's it going, Sam?
Hey, we're good. We're recording, buddy. We're live right now.
That's awesome.
What's up, Drew?
Hey, how's it going, Nick?
We're glad that you could join us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So guys, this is Drew. You guys may remember him. He's been on a couple podcasts in the past over some backcountry elk hunting and backcountry camping. Some really good episodes, episodes 60 and 20. You guys should check them out if you have not already. But as we've already mentioned, Drew's our marketing manager, and he's our guy. He's the knowledgeable one for Montana and pronghorn and mule deer and all that good stuff. So Drew, we were just talking about Montana and kind of what led into me going up there and joining you in 2018. Literally just started talking about how you sent me that email, you sent me that invite to come up there and join you, and how it was a unique opportunity that I've never gotten to really experience before. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was kind of a unique thing for me too. I'd actually just started antelope hunting out there the year before, and I'd realized that it was such a great spot that I really needed to get some other people out there and see if we can't produce some good footage and get some good content. And man, the hunting out there didn't let us down.
Absolutely not. So I kind of wanted to lead into this conversation, kind of talking about a little bit about kind of what I expected versus what it really was when I got up there, and then also kind of get your take on it, Drew, too. Talking about, I know you just said that you had only hunted up there a year or so prior, but how 2018 compared to the activity and anything that you'd seen out there in the years prior. So
yeah, 2018 was a good year. that buck you shot that was a pretty nice buck. And I mean, that year was great. We had some really good snow cover when you were out there. And for some reason, this piece of property that we hunt it's a lot better once we get some snow on it. And it really pushes them off up into that hilltop, I guess is the best way to describe it. It's pretty flat around that area. And this piece of private that we had access to it's 400 acres, but it's some pretty gnarly terrain with some pretty big hills and some pretty big ravines in it. And for some reason, once that snow hits, they really like the top of that hill there where they can see quite a ways.
Yeah. Yeah, the snow was definitely something that caught me off guard because I go up there, I think it was like September 27th or 28th, end of September, which down here in Texas, it's still hotter than the devil's butt crack. So I'm used to being in shorts and a t-shirt, and I go up there, and day number 1 or 2, I guess, there was a blanket of snow on everything. So I was not saying I didn't have warm clothes, but I definitely was not quite prepared to be hunting in the snow. I think I stuck out like a sore thumb wearing my Realtree camo around up there.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult to plan for the weather out there. Being so close to the mountains where we're at, it's really affected not only daily but kind of hourly as far as what the weather's going to be. There's been times where it's snowing one minute and then really hot the next, or vice versa. And it's something the animals are used to, but it's something that takes quite a bit to get adapted to when you're hunting it.
So Drew, tell us a little bit for those guys who are not as familiar with pronghorn hunting, who are like me and Nick and just now getting into it, or maybe are considering it and have never done it before. What is, as a deer hunter, what is unique to a pronghorn's behavior in your mind? What are some of the things that you would really want somebody to know going into it? Some of the stuff that you made sure that you told me regarding how they acted and everything like that when I first got up there.
Yeah. So the major difference, I guess, is that antelope are kind of curious, and if they don't get a good look at you or a good view of what you are, then chances are they might just come in and check you out just to see, and they might not stick around for a long time, but they're definitely going to come over and take a look and kind of get closer to you so they can find out what it is. Mm-hmm. So that presents itself with some unique opportunities, especially out there where we're hunting with all those hills and those gullies and the ravines and stuff. It's really easy to kind of use the terrain to your advantage, sneak really slowly until you can see, most of the time, just the tops of the ears. And then what you're really doing is kind of playing a little bit of cat and mouse with them and kind of peeking over the ravine or over the hill and just sort of letting them know that you're there a little bit if they're far away. And sometimes you get lucky and they're close, but it seems to have worked out for us a few times in the past where we crest over a hill and then drop down, and those antelope come running in to check out and see what it is.
Yeah. So I killed my buck on day 3 out there, the evening of day 3. How many stalks would you say that we had in earlier that week?
Oh man, we had a lot of opportunities. I think the most interesting one was that first one that we had, that first encounter.
Yeah.
We were walking around the hill and they were on a spot. I don't know. They're a lot like deer in that you can pattern them, but they're totally different. They're not going to spook as easily if you don't just come running up on them. And it always seems that one part of the hill, it's the way it rounds around. It's not just an up and over the hill. You're kind of side hilling, and the way it works out there, they want to come in and check it out. And that first stock that we put on, I think we ranged him at 23 yards. And I remember what you said after it when he came in, and I was thinking the whole time, I was like, man, is Sam going to shoot or what? And I was like, and I ranged him, and he was 23 yards, I think, at the closest. So
So I was gonna ask you about that because again, that was my very first stalk, my very first time encountering these things. I was clueless. I really had no idea what I was doing, and I was gonna ask you what your thoughts were when I did not shoot that buck because he wasn't a giant. He certainly wasn't as big as the one that I ended up with, but he was still a very respectable buck and one that probably deserved to get an arrow flung at him.
Yeah, and the way he came into and just kind of stood 20 yards broadside, I was there. There was a second where I was thinking, man, is Sam going to shoot, and when's he going to shoot? And I remember, I think it's even on camera. I kind of looked over at you like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, especially spot and stock with archery equipment, that's a challenge in and of itself. And so, kind of at that point, I don't really know that. I mean, it's always nice to shoot a trophy, but being able to spot and stock an antelope with a bow and arrow that's kind of a trophy in and of itself if you get one. So
I completely agree, and in hindsight, especially after last year, which I know we're going to talk about 2019 and the challenges that came with that in our next episode, but especially last year, now look back on that very first stalk, that very first opportunity, and I wonder what the heck I was thinking.
We want to know too, Sam.
Yeah, well, that makes three of us, guys. I don't know. I was sitting behind Drew. I had my bow in my hand. I had an arrow on the string, and I was just looking at this speed goat that was standing 23 yards away.
Well, and you also, I mean, they always say, don't pass up something on the first day that you wouldn't want on the last day, But also, you want to kind of savor that hunt and enjoy it a little bit before you just go out there first stalk and kill one.
It's a fine line between the two, really.
Absolutely.
And that's I think the biggest battle because and probably honestly one of the bigger reasons why my brain told me not to shoot that one because we were an hour or two into daylight on the first day and I had a shot opportunity, and you think something like that and you're like, oh man, this can be easy,
Mm-hmm.
when it's quite in fact the opposite. So it's I know again next week we're going to talk about kind of 2020 and leading into the year, but Nick, for you going up there hopefully this year for the first time, as much as we want to make the trip last and enjoy our time up there, if you get a shot like that on the first day, you're stupid not to take it.
Oh yeah. If I that's what I was gonna say. Also, is if I was in that same situation, which Monday morning quarterback, I would like to think that I would take that shot as well. But you never know what's gonna go through your mind when you're put in that situation.
Well, at least next year you're gonna have me and Drew with you, hopefully, that are both gonna be nudging you, telling you to get ready and shoot.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. I got two solid guides with me.
You got one solid guy and a wannabe.
I'll take it.
yeah, and that's the thing too with the antelope hunting is, I mean, it goes from 0 to 60 real quick.
Yes.
1 minute you're walking around the hill, and the next minute those antelope are 20 yards away, and they don't give you a lot of time to think about whether or not you want to shoot. You better be ready.
Yes. So we had that encounter the first day, and we had some smaller encounters at longer distances throughout the week. I think I know that was a challenging few days for you too, Drew, because your back was acting up and making it hard sometimes to do some spot and stalk. So we were about 50-50 on whether you were with me out there too at the same time. So
yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, the terrain that we're hiking in and the challenges that come along with spot and stock hunting, and I guess having back issues, the challenges that come along with a 12-hour car ride to get there really showed themselves after a couple of days walking around in the cold. And it makes it challenging for sure when you can't walk and when that's slowing you down. It's something where I wanted to be there, but there was times where I knew it was better for you to be there alone and not having me dragging you down. Even though you might not have the experience, you definitely had the advantage in being able to be nimble, be quick, crouch down when you needed to, and just sort of do the things that you need to do when you're antelope hunting. And I wanted to be there doing all that spot and stock with you all the time, but there was kind of an advantage too, being able to get in the truck and go scout out some new land that I'd never been to, and it ended up being a really good spot, and it's one that we've ended up hunting a couple of times and seen some really nice goats out there too. So
Absolutely.
I mean, even at that point, you never know when you're out hunting where I guess you're gonna find your next honey hole, and kind of lucked out in that my back was hurting because we found one really nice spot to hunt.
Well, we'll get into here in a second what transpired on my end when you were out there scouting out the next honey hole. But there's one stalk that I wanna talk about, and it was one where it's on video. I was able to self-film it, but it's one where you were absent during this particular one. But I think it was day number 2. There was snow on the ground, and we had I was coming down that hill, actually down where that ground blind was set up on that water hole down there. I was making my way down there, and there was four pronghorn down there, a buck and 3 does, kind of on that little flat area behind where the blind sits, So was making my way down there and saw the 4 of them, and that was probably the first time the first stalk where I really had to use the terrain to really strategically kind of plan out my path of travel to get down there, because they were slowly working toward me, and there were a couple little draws and little low spots in between me and them, but I'm on top of a hill, and I have to figure out how to get down this hill and to them within bow range without them seeing me when I'm above them. It's really it's kind of a sketchy situation, So using the terrain to work your way down there, and unfortunately it didn't work out. I think I got to 112 yards before they finally spotted me and blew me out of there. But that, like I said, that was the first time that I was really having to strategically think about terrain and my path of travel, which is important during spot and stalk. So
it is, and that piece of private ground that we hunt there too, like it is hilly and there is a lot of terrain, but it's pretty wide open, and it's one of those things where it took me years, a couple of them actually, to learn how to hunt that property. And I don't know if we've released the video of it, but I self-filmed my first year out there, and that footage isn't much more than me being frustrated the whole time because I blew another one and got into a position where I thought I was good, and all of a sudden I busted myself essentially because I poked up at the wrong spot and they were too far away to even think about shooting. But at that point, they know you're there. And it's not like some of those other times where we're in close and we're in the right spot and they're coming in to check and see what you are. It's at 150 yards. They know what you're doing, and they're pretty aware of it at that point, especially a little bit later in the season when they've seen people out hunting and they've been chased a little bit. And once they see those people walking around, they're used to people on horseback. They're used to people in trucks. But people on feet generally for them mean danger, and so if they see you like that, you're pretty done. And yeah, like I said, I self-filmed that hunt, and I don't know if that's something we've even released, but that might be an interesting one to go back and pull out and just kind of share the frustrations that come along with learning how to antelope hunt, because I was 7 days into it before I even had a chance, I think, if I remember right. And yeah, it was day after day of blowing pretty good opportunities had I known the right way to approach it. So,
well, I know that's footage that we don't have online right now, and that might be something cool that we get on over to old Nick Powell over there to play around with and maybe put out a cool video before our trip this fall hopefully comes up. So
Yeah, I might be able to do a little something with it.
yeah, you can get a little creative sometimes.
Sometimes.
So I have in my notes here, guys, that I want to talk about kind of getting into the successful side of the 2018 story, the 2018 trip. Drew, as you know, the buck that I ended up killing, the day that I killed it was not the first time that we saw him. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, we were out scouting, and we were actually, I want to say we were probably 4 miles as the crow flies from where the ground blind was set up, and my truck gets a lot further than that. It was probably a half an hour drive back over to that other side, but
Yeah.
we saw it. He was right on the road. We sat and watched him in the snowstorm, and he couldn't have cared less that we were there 20 yards, 30 yards away from him, whatever it was. But it was really interesting, too, to see him with that broken cutter. And it's not something I've seen a lot of, and that was a pretty unique buck.
For sure. We're driving down the road, and we see these pronghorn off in this field right off the road, off to our left, and we had to turn around and come back because we just got a glimpse of him, and he was a stud. And we whipped the truck around, come back. We got some cool footage of him just sitting there with those does. Like Drew said, he couldn't have cared less. And I just remember both of us talking in the truck about how good of a buck that was and how cool it was, talking about the cutter and watching him slowly just kind of push those does back into the hills a little bit, wishing that I could see a buck like that on the property that we had permission to hunt. So
yeah, that was one of those bucks where that's why we turned around. I knew the second we saw him that was a fully mature antelope, and that was something worth going after. I mean, he was, I don't want to call him fat, but that was a big-bodied antelope,
Yeah.
And he was pretty wide. And I mean, you could tell just from looking at him next to those does that was definitely something you wanted to see closer.
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw him the day before, and I think now is probably as good a time as any to talk about some of the frustrations leading up into the actual hunt where I put one on the ground, because it was once again one of those hunts where I was flying solo out there, and the third day, man, it warmed up a lot. Like, it was like 60 degrees. Like it's changed from night to day, basically, from snow to sunshine and warm, and I was shocked at how quickly everything dried out there.
Yeah, that's the thing too out there, is that sun is really warm. We're at a pretty high elevation out there. I think it's right around 5,000 feet, and so when that sun comes out and it gets warm, that dry air out there, that snow melts quick, and it's definitely something you notice.
Yeah, absolutely. I went out there that evening, and I think I got out there like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Fairly earlier, and with the plan of sitting in that ground blind because it was warm, because it was drying out, and hoping that might catch something coming into that water hole. And I decided to make a quick pass, just kind of around kind of that hill, actually, where we had that very first encounter with that buck at 23 yards. I decided to make a pass down there just to see if anything was moving, and I'd kind of finished my route, and I was heading in the direction of the ground blind, which was still a ways off. And there's this one buck just by himself on top of that flat, like on top of that hill out there, and he's a couple hundred yards out. So I crouched down, and I'm trying to think, how can I get a shot at this guy? And that's where the curiosity that you're talking about, Drew, came in play, because the dude just started walking toward me. He saw me. He saw that there was something there, but I just crouched down as soon as I saw him, and he closed the gap all the way to 80 yards. And at the time, with the bow setup I was running that year, I didn't have the CBE Engage hybrid sight that I have now, which can give me the option to go out to 100 yards. I had a 5-pin fixed pin sight, so 60 was my max. I was comfortable stacking pins and going to 70 with that, but I wasn't going to fling one at a buck at 80, was what I'd come up with in my own mind. So he just kind of barely skirted around the outside edge of my range, and it was kind of, I tried to kind of follow him a little bit, but I mean, the amateur in me was kicking in, and I probably wouldn't have done that now in hindsight. And if you were there, Drew, you probably would have told me, "What the heck are you doing, man? You're an idiot." But
I mean, that's wishful thinking. Yeah, my first couple of years hunting them too, I thought the same thing, that they're only walking, and I'm walking, and so we should be able to kind of keep pace, and maybe it'll luck out. We'll get some terrain that they stop, and we get in a little closer. But you don't realize how much ground those things cover quick.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He covered so much ground so quickly, and next thing I know, I am much farther down the trail than I realized, and I'm winded, I'm hot, I'm sweaty, I'm tired, and I'm discouraged at this point. Because at this point, we've had several unsuccessful stalks, and I'm beginning to get a little skeptical about this whole bow hunting antelope thing. So I decided to go down the ground blind and just sit there the rest of the night. And I'm working my way down the ground blind. On the hillside opposite the ground blind, there's like 7 does, no bucks, 7 does, all bedded over there. So I ended up having to sit on the side of the hill for a good 30-40 minutes or so and wait for them to move out of there before I could even go to the blind. I didn't want to bump them out of there, but I really just didn't have another option. They weren't worth trying to get a stalk on, in my opinion. So I just had to play the waiting game.
That brings up a good question, because I know, like Sam said earlier, we're familiar with hunting whitetail, who have a rut like a week or two out of the year where they rut. Is there anything similar to that antelope have, or they just kind of get their ladies and go on about their business?
So there is a rut for sure, and it seems longer than the whitetail rut, but I want to call it's pretty similar, if not even shorter. But what happens is those big mature bucks start rounding up their harem of does, and it's interesting to watch. They'll actually chase them and kind of corner them and really cut them off and kind of contained. And so even before the rut really kicks off, you'll start to see them gathering groups and kind of getting things together. And it starts to become the rut when those smaller bucks kind of hang out on the skirt edges of those groups and are trying to make moves in, and you start to see that bigger buck really pushing those other bucks out. And I know we're going to talk about it later at some point, but that is the time of year when those fan decoys really come into play, is when they're concerned about those smaller satellite bucks kind of working their way in, and they want to protect that harem. And so it's definitely something you notice, but it's a lot different than the whitetail rut for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
That's good stuff, Drew. I may have missed it because my brain goes a million directions at one time. But did you say what time of year that normally happens?
I didn't, and it's strange. It seems to vary. I've seen it sort of anywhere from late September, and that I think it has to do with how high up we are there and the weather, much as anything else. But it seems that it could be as early as late September some years, but other years it seems like it's later in October, sometimes into early November, and it's not the same as the whitetail rut as far as it's in that second week of November, and it's pretty predictable. It's, as far as I can tell, it seems to be kind of all over the place. And now there's people who hunt antelope way more than me, and they're probably listening to this saying that I'm way wrong on that. But I think it really depends too on the property that you're hunting and the pressure that it's receiving and kind of what that looks like as well.
What kind of elevation is the property that you guys hunted?
It's like 5,000 feet in elevation.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. And it's really interesting that other spot that we've talked about where I was out scouting while Sam was sitting in the ground blind. It's interesting the way the terrain changes so much. I think I was probably down around 2,000 feet, if that. So.
Okay.
Sam was sitting in the snow, and I was driving around, and it was hot, and I was in a t-shirt. So.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I know we'll get into more of kind of not only the weather difference, but the terrain difference we saw. We'll get into that in next week's episode as well. So,
yeah, it's like I said before. That's the nice thing about Montana is it really gives you options as far as both weather and temperature and cover. So,
yeah. So we'll keep moving here. That way we can wrap it up and get back to our busy lives that we have so much of. Those does that were on the side of that hill, they finally cleared out of there, and I was able to make my way down the blind. And by the time I get down the blind, I'm gassed. I'm tired. I'm hot. I'm sweaty. I'm discouraged, and really second guessing my decision to bow hunt pronghorn antelope, the fastest animal in North America, in Montana. So I'm sitting there, and I hadn't been sitting in that blind for 20 minutes, and I look down off to my right, kind of following the edge of this little draw, this little not really a creek, but this little valley. It went all the way to the property line, which was a couple 100 yards away from me, and then there was a big hill on the other side of that property line. I look over, and this big mature looking pronghorn buck had just topped that hill and was coming down toward the fence line. And he's moving pretty quick, and like Drew said, stuff changes in a second, and just like that, it started looking like my luck was about to change. He ducks under that fence, he comes running in, I'm picking up my bow, I'm ranging him. He's at, over 100, he's closing the gap, he's at 90, he's at 80, and then I remember making a note to myself in my mind, he's at 53 yards, that's within my bow range. And I had ranged a little spot on the edge of the watering hole right at about 40 yards, and he came walking right through that spot. I put my 40-yard pin on him, let it fly, and when I shot, it was weird. It was like one of those moments where everything happened in slow motion in your brain, and when you play it back in your brain, it's slow motion almost. I remember my arrow, seeing it going at kind of arcing, kind of going up, and my initial thought in my brain was, I just shot over the top of this thing, and then I heard that smack, that you hear when your arrow hits the broadside of an animal, and I was like, oh man, I hit that thing. And I'm watching him run away, and he's got blood pouring out the side of him, and I started getting excited, and it was just one of those things. I guess I hadn't, when in target practicing with that bow, I had not consciously made a note of my arrow flight and the arc at those longer distances at 40 and over, and so when I saw that, when I actually shot, it surprised me, and my initial thought was that I missed him, that I shot high until I heard it hit him. So
That's crazy.
But he took off, he ran down that bottom and crashed down there. I was super excited. Words can't really do justice my reaction. So I encourage you guys to actually go watch this hunt. We were able to get it all on video. It is chapter 3 of our flagship series, Fall Obsessed Outdoors. It's on our YouTube channel, and it's on our website. And a majority of the hunts, including that first one where I didn't shoot the buck at 23 yards, all that is in that series and in that show. So if you guys want to actually go watch these hunts and see them for yourself, I encourage you to go do that. I think that's one of the cool things that comes with us being able to document our hunts like that, because we're able to share them. Not only talk about them on a podcast, but we're also able to share them with people, and they can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it's also just a memory for us. After years have gone by, we can come back and look at these hunts and say, man, like you'll be able to say, that was my first antelope. How cool is that?
Yeah.
After you've gotten 15 of them on the wall.
Hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves, all right?
Yeah. I think the funny part about that, too, is to hear you describe that as such a slow experience. And, I mean, when people go back and watch the video, they're going to laugh, because I think all in all, that happens in the blink of an eye. That thing is in your lap before you know it. And
right.
And it's all over in seconds. But I know what you're saying, that it feels like a lifetime when you're actually there in the moment.
Yeah, in the moment, and looking back on it, I felt like that antelope was running down that hill and coming toward me for half a day, and then the arrow was in flight for a good couple hours at least. Is how that felt in the moment, when in reality it was probably from start to finish it was a minute or barely more probably. So it's crazy how fast stuff can happen. So Drew, I wanted to get your side of the story, because guys can go watch this hunt, and obviously you just heard me tell my story. I'm sure I'll get into my initial reaction walking up on this thing, but you like we mentioned, you were scouting while this hunt was taking place. So kind of tell us what you were doing and what it was like when I called you.
Yeah, so I was actually back on some BLM land and just driving down a little 2-track road, and not very fast, about walking speed a little bit more. And it was very interesting because I had this antelope walking not even 40 yards from my truck, and it probably walked side by side with me for 10-15 minutes just walking down this road. And the whole time I was thinking, man, I wish Sam was here instead of that ground buck, because that was a really nice buck too. And I think we got some video of that, but it was really interesting. I was thinking, man, if Sam doesn't shoot one today, we're gonna have to come back here tomorrow, because there's no way this antelope sees this truck. I mean, we could have stopped the truck. You could have stepped out and shot it over the hood of the truck. It would have been easy, game over. And I know, looking back on that after doing a lot more antelope hunting, that those types of opportunities don't happen all the time, very often at all.
No, man, you tell me that now. You tell me that there was one walking alongside your truck. Now, after last year, 2019, I'm like, what in the world? What's wrong with that antelope?
And I mean, and it's the same spot we hunted. So
yeah,
it just happens to be some days they don't care, and other days they know exactly what you're doing.
For sure.
And so I was scouting that out, and man, I saw, I don't want to call it a ton of antelope, but it was a lot of dispersed groups, and they were small groups too, which seemed to be a lot easier to get in on spot and stock than those big groups with all the eyes. And that in and of itself kind of showed to me that was going to be a place that we needed to go check out more and kind of go put some time and effort into. And so I was actually on my way out of there, and I popped back into cell phone service because it's kind of on the backside of the mountain there, and you don't get a lot of cell reception. But man, as soon as I hit cell phone service, my phone started blowing up, and it was Sam, and it was, "Hey, call me when you can. Hey, I shot one. Hey, oh my God, it's a big one." And so I called you, and man, I could hear you just shaking through the phone, just through your voice and through everything. I could tell how jazzed up you were. So
well,
it didn't take me long to figure out that you put down a pretty nice antelope.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, by the time that, like, yeah, I texted you and called you and left a message or whatever, like right after it happened, right after I initially calmed down, but it was probably a good half hour after I killed him, 20 minutes to a half hour before we actually got a hold of each other, and I was still amped. I mean, it was just, it was crazy. So he went down that bottom, and I just went up on this hill, just kind of one of the sides, just a little bit, so I could see him laying down there. I could see him dead at the bottom, and I wanted to run down there and grab him so bad, but my camera work during the shot itself was pretty. That's the one part of that hunt I regret, is not moving my camera a little bit farther, because I did not get the angle that I needed on that shot. That's what comes with self-filming, I guess. But I wanted to at least give guys a good recovery on video, so I wanted to wait till you could get out there before I went down there and grabbed him, because I wanted it to be on video, and it worked out. But man, standing there waiting, no offense, but it seemed like you were driving really slow. It took forever for you to get out there.
Yeah, and that's just the kind of the nature of the beast out there. Is it's pretty far actually to the other spot that we were looking at. Is those zones out there for the antelope are huge, so you can really get all over the state and see antelope. But and going back to that self-filming thing, one part about I regret, and this was early on in our filming career and self-filming career, but man, I thought I hit record when I called you, and I actually stopped the camera. So I was really hoping to have that conversation on film, and I really wish I did still, because man, to hear how happy you were that you shot that, it was something I wish I could have captured.
For sure, man. Well, what you did capture, and for those people who might not know, what is actually on every single episode of Fall Obsession Podcast is part of that hunt and part of those reactions. When you guys listen to the intro to every single episode, you're going to hear me say at some point, he's down, he's freaking down. And that's me talking about when I first laid eyes on my goat laying in that bottom after I'd shot him. And then you'll also hear Drew say, he said he shot a freaking giant or something like that. And that's Drew.
An absolute giant.
An absolute giant. That's what it was. Yeah. That's Drew driving out to me to come rescue me and come help me. And he did a little bit of video and during that portion and I guess making up for the phone call he didn't record.
And you know what? I'll tell you, I was not driving slow, and that was the longest drive to get from point A to point B I think I've experienced. Even though it was only 20 miles, it seemed like that took an hour and a half.
Yeah, it really did. Well, it was an awesome hunt for sure. It's one I won't forget. I know walking up on that goat, the shot was awesome. Just straight up double lung, mid shoulder, and then being able to look at like you said earlier, a mature goat. The broken cutter was cool, and I'm sure we got some pictures of that we'll post in coordination with the publication of this episode. But he was such a cool buck, man. He was mature and he was a fighter. Really unique buck, and the cutter is probably the biggest reason we were able to identify him from the day before. So
yeah, and man, I know you said you double lunged him, but that was one heck of a shot. Those things can cover a lot of ground in a hurry, and I don't even think he went 30-40 yards. It was straight downhill, and he didn't make it far.
No, he did run a little ways because he kind of took the long way into getting where he ended up. He did some uphill travel and some downhill rolling. So, but no, he was a stud. And for those guys who are wondering how big he in fact was, I did just do a rough score on him. He taped out at 68 inches and some change, which is above the minimum for the Pope and Young record book. He, however, is not in the record book because I was not thinking about having a record book pronghorn when I shot him, and when I had him mounted, I had that broken cutter repaired. You can't put anything in the record book with artificial antler, so that no worky.
Drew, what's a respectable size for a buck?
You know, I mean, you'll hear all sorts of different numbers, especially when you talk to people who do a lot of pronghorn hunting and multi-state stuff. And it depends on the area that you're in. I know Sam's was one of the bigger ones that I've seen out there. And I mean, I've shot some nice ones. I've shot some older ones. I've shot some that are missing teeth and are kind of on that downhill slide again. But I haven't seen any that really had that body mass that his did, and not only the body mass but just kind of the thickness to those pronghorns, and those cutters, they stick way out there on that, and that's a pretty nice antelope.
In other words, don't expect to be killing one like that this year, Nick.
Yeah, I'll be happy with the first shot that I get.
You and me both.
That would be an interesting follow-up to this. Is we should take on that, and we'll go through for you guys and go through how you measure a pronghorn, how to kind of judge them in the field a little bit, and sort of what good scores are for antelope. But again, that varies with where you're at and where you're hunting. Some areas are known for really, really big antelope, and this area is really not. And so to shoot that 68 and a half or 60, whatever you said it was.
68 and 3/8, I think is what he was.
Yep. And so to shoot an antelope like that in that area that's really nice, and that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah, hopefully awesome. Hopefully between the three of us, hopefully we have 3 on the ground this year on video for you guys, and even if we just get one, like Drew said, we'll do some exclusive and some more specific stuff like that to to hopefully help you guys out either this season or in future seasons. So
Yeah. And I've got 2 that I'd like to score myself. That 5.5-year-old that I shot, and then the one that I shot last year, that's my best antelope to date, was the one that I shot last year.
that was a really good one.
It was nice, and we'll have to have a discussion on the story of that one sometime. But that's kind of a funny story in and of itself. So
Awesome. Well, guys, we're out of time for part 1 of our 2-part Montana saga. And like I said, you guys are going to be able to join us next week. We'll talk more about 2019. We can probably talk about what Drew just said, that goat that he killed out there, and some other stuff that we're looking forward to 2020 with the pending draw results that we all got our fingers crossed for. That happens tomorrow at the time we're recording this podcast. So we're all pumped and excited and anxious for that, and we'll let you guys know how that goes. But for now, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another Follow-Up Session podcast episode. If you guys have not already, please go to our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like and follow us. We got a lot of awesome content from not just us, but also our experienced pro and field staffers. And hunting season is just around the corner, so we're going to have a lot more content coming you guys' way, both relevant to hunting and getting prepared for the season. So be sure that you check all that out. If you haven't already, hit that follow and subscribe button on this podcast. Follow-Up Session Podcast is on all of your favorite podcast apps. So be sure that you follow along and get notified every time we post an episode. And if you guys have any questions or any topic suggestions, please feel free to let us know. There's a spot on our website, followobsession.com/podcast, where you guys can go and send those in. So we look forward to getting some feedback from you guys and dishing out some more content for you in future episodes. Also, if you have not already, we got a new hat out right now, the Sharpshooter Trucker hat. It's pretty sweet, so you guys go pick one of those up at our online store as well, along with some of our cool t-shirt designs. So, guys, you got anything else?
no, not right now.
Yeah, same here. I'm all giving you all I got
All right, man.
for this time.
For this time. Always for this time. Looking forward to next time. All right, guys. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you next week for part 2 of our Montana series. Catch you later.